Most hiking accidents usually have some sort of explanation. Someone gets lost, a sudden storm rolls in, or an avalanche strikes. But every once in a while, something happens that completely breaks the minds of investigators. It leaves them with way more questions than answers. Tonight's story is exactly that kind of unsolved mystery. It was late January of 1959. 9 experienced hikers set out on a tough winter expedition through the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. The whole group was led by a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. Now, every single person in this group was highly trained to survive the brutal winter and freezing conditions. They had plenty of food, warm clothing, and all the gear they needed to complete the journey safely. At first, everything about the trip seemed perfectly normal. The group kept journals, took photographs, and spent their time laughing and documenting their progress. In fact, their very last photographs showed smiling faces. There wasn't a single trace of fear in their eyes. No one could have ever guessed that just a few hours later, they would all disappear forever. When the hikers failed to return on their scheduled date, people got worried. A search party was put together and sent up into the mountains. Days later, searchers finally spotted their tent, half buried under the snow. From a distance, it looked normal. But when investigators stepped closer, what they saw sent shivers down their spines. The tent hadn't been opened using the zipper like normal. Instead, it had been violently slashed open from the inside with a knife. Whoever was inside was in such a massive panic that they didn't even take the time to use the door. What could have possibly come at them to make 9 experienced hikers slash their way out into a -30-degree, pitch-black, freezing night? Outside the tent, investigators found a trail of footprints leading down the hill. And here's the weird part. Some prints were made by people wearing boots. Others were made by people wearing only socks. And some were completely barefoot. Think about that for a second. The temperature that night was around -30 degrees Celsius. No sane, experienced hiker would willingly leave a warm tent dressed like that. Something absolutely forced them out. Nearly a mile away, beneath a massive cedar tree, they found the first 2 bodies. It looked like they had tried to build a small fire to survive. The branches of the tree were broken, suggesting they had desperately climbed up high, possibly trying to see something out in the distance. But they never made it back to safety. Several hundred meters away, 3 more bodies were found lying frozen in the snow. Looking at their positions, investigators believed they were trying to crawl their way back to the tent against all odds. But the cold took them before they could ever reach it. The story gets even more disturbing a few months later. When the snow finally began to melt, the last 4 hikers were discovered deep inside a nearby ravine. And the injuries on their bodies left everyone completely stunned. One hiker had a severely fractured skull. Another had multiple crushed ribs. Doctors said the force was so incredibly powerful that it compared to the injuries you'd see in a horrific high-speed car crash. Yet, here is the kicker. There were almost no visible external cuts or bruises on their skin. One of the female victims was completely missing her tongue. And later, when they tested their clothes in a lab, some of them showed bizarrely high levels of radiation. Over the last 60 years, countless wild theories have been thrown around. An unexpected avalanche, a secret government military test, a strange infrasound caused by the wind that drives people crazy. Some even think they witnessed something in the dark that nobody was ever supposed to see. But truth be told, not a single one of those theories answers every question. Why did they flee the tent without any proper winter clothing? How did they get those devastating internal injuries without any outside marks? And most importantly, what terrified 9 experienced hikers enough to make them run out into a frozen wilderness, knowing it almost certainly meant a brutal death? More than 60 years have passed since that night. The mountain remains completely silent. The evidence has faded away with time. But the mystery has never disappeared. Perhaps the real truth was buried deep beneath the snow, long before anyone ever arrived to look for it. Some places become famous for their beauty, but others leave a permanent stain of fear on people's minds.
right in the middle of downtown Los Angeles, California, stands the Cecil Hotel. For decades, the name of this hotel has been tied to crime, mysterious deaths, and incredibly strange occurrences. But a single event that happened back in 2013 put this hotel right at the center of global attention. That event was the mysterious disappearance of Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old university student from Vancouver, Canada. She absolutely loved to travel. She took photos, kept journals, and regularly shared her travel experiences on her blog. In late January of 2013, she set out on a solo trip across the United States. On January 26, she checked into the Cecil Hotel. According to the hotel staff, Elisa was friendly, cheerful, and incredibly excited to explore the new city. For the first few days, everything seemed perfectly normal. She visited different places around town, stopped by bookstores, bought some souvenirs, and she kept in regular contact with her parents. But on January 31, 2013, everything changed. That was the day Elisa was scheduled to check out of the hotel, but she never did. Back home, her parents were waiting for their daughter's phone call, but no call ever came. They sent message after message, zero replies. As time kept passing, they realized something terrible had happened. Eventually, the Los Angeles Police Department launched an investigation to find Elisa. Officers searched her hotel room. Hotel employees were questioned. Every single corridor, every stairwell, even every public area of the hotel was thoroughly searched. They even brought in trained tracking dogs for the search. But there was absolutely no trace of Elisa. It was almost as if she had suddenly vanished off the face of the earth. Days turned into weeks. Then, investigators decided to release the security footage from one of the hotel elevators. They hoped that maybe someone would recognize Elisa, or that this video might bring forward some new information. But once the video was released, the mystery only grew deeper. Within just a few days, millions of people all over the world watched that footage. And almost everyone started asking the exact same question. Inside that elevator, what on earth was Elisa Lam actually looking at?
The video starts with Elisa Lam walking into one of the hotel elevators. Right away, she hits almost all the buttons on the panel. But here's the creepy part. The doors just won't close. She then slowly peeks her head out into the hallway, looking around as if she's searching for someone in the corridor. Or maybe she was trying to hide from someone. A few seconds later, she steps back inside, and that's when things get really unsettling. Her hands start moving in a very strange, unnatural way. It honestly looked like she was talking to someone who wasn't even there. Or maybe she was gesturing to someone. But the weirdest thing is, throughout the entire footage, nobody else ever shows up. A few moments later, Elisa walks out of the elevator, and after that, she was never seen on camera again. Once the video was released to the public, the internet went crazy with theories. Some people believed she was running from someone dangerous. Others thought she was just deeply confused, and many were convinced it was something paranormal. But the truth is, nobody could prove anything. Meanwhile, people staying at the hotel started making some really disturbing complaints. They said the water coming out of the taps looked a strange, dark color. It tasted awful. And some guests even complained about a terrible smell. Because of this, the hotel management decided to go check it out. An employee climbed up onto the roof to inspect the massive water tanks. The moment he opened the heavy lid, he was faced with something he would never be able to forget. Floating right there inside the tank was Elisa Lam's body. The police immediately opened the case back up. But a huge question remained. How did Elisa even get onto the roof in the first place? And more importantly, how did she end up inside that water tank? Investigators found out that the main doors to the roof were locked and alarmed. However, there were a few fire escapes and open pathways someone could use to get up there. Later on, officials stated they found no physical evidence showing anyone else was involved in her death. The final report called it an accidental drowning. But even today, most people just don't buy that answer. That elevator video still leaves way too many questions. What was Elisa actually looking at out there? Who was she talking to? Or did something happen in that hallway that the camera just couldn't capture? Maybe the real truth is lost forever, trapped inside the dark walls of the Cecil Hotel.
Some of history's most terrifying mysteries didn't actually start with a murder. They started with a warning that nobody truly understood. Until it was way too late. The year was 1922. Hidden deep in the countryside of Bavaria, Germany, stood a small, isolated farm known as Hinterkaifeck. It was the kind of place where silence completely ruled the landscape. The nearest village was nearly a mile away, and once the sun went down, the entire farm was swallowed by total darkness. 6 people lived there: Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, her 2 young children, and the family's new maid, who had just started working their only hours before the tragedy. To outsiders, it looked like a completely ordinary farmhouse. But strange things had already started happening. A few days before the murders, Andreas Gruber stepped outside after a fresh snowfall. As he walked across the yard, he noticed something highly unusual. A single trail of footprints, leading from the nearby forest, straight toward the farmhouse. Curious, he followed them. But something just didn't make any sense. There were footprints leading to the farm, but none leading away. It was as if whoever had arrived never actually left. Thinking someone might be hiding nearby, Andreas searched the entire property. He checked the barn, the tool shed, the woods surrounding the house, but he found absolutely nothing. No strangers, no animals, no explanation. Then, the strange incidents became even more disturbing. Late at night, the family started hearing slow, heavy footsteps coming from the attic, back and forth, again and again, almost as if someone was quietly walking right above their heads. Each time Andreas climbed up into the attic to check it out, he found absolutely nothing. No person, no animal, just silence. Then, another unsettling discovery was made. A set of house keys had suddenly vanished. Nobody in the family admitted to taking them. And shortly after that, Andreas found a strange newspaper lying on the property. It didn't belong to anyone in the house, and nobody knew where it had come from. By now, it was becoming impossible to ignore the feeling that someone was watching the family, someone who knew the farm, someone who might already be much closer than anyone could have ever imagined. The strange events continued, but no matter how unsettling they became, life on the farm simply went on. Then came March 31st, 1922, the day the Gruber family hired a new maid. She arrived that afternoon. According to her sister, the young woman had been heavily warned about the farm before taking the job. The previous maid had quit only months earlier. She claimed the house was haunted, swearing that she could constantly hear slow footsteps at night, strange voices coming from the walls, and a suffocating feeling that someone was always watching her. No one believed her. And now, another woman had taken her place. As evening fell, the farm grew completely quiet. No neighbors reported hearing any screams, no gunshots, nothing unusual. Then, one by one, members of the family were lured into the dark barn. No one knows exactly what happened inside, but investigators later believe the victims didn't all enter at the same time. Someone appeared to be waiting, hidden right there in the darkness. The first victim never came back, then another, and another. By the time the night was over, 6 innocent people had been brutally murdered. What makes this case even more disturbing is what happened next. The killer didn't run. He didn't disappear into the deep forest. Evidence suggested that whoever committed these horrific murders stayed at the farm for several days afterward. The animals were fed and cared for. Meals appeared to have been freshly prepared in the kitchen. Smoke continued rising from the chimney. It was as if someone was still living there, sleeping in their beds, walking through the exact same rooms, completely surrounded by the bodies of the people they had just slaughtered. Who would do something like that? And more importantly, why? After the murders, things took an even stranger turn. For days, absolutely no one realized the Gruber family was gone. Neighbors did notice that the farm had gone completely quiet and that no one was walking around outside, but at the same time, the livestock were still being fed. Smoke kept rising from the chimney. From a distance, it looked like just another ordinary day on the farm. It was almost as if someone was still in that house, going about their daily routine. Eventually, a few concerned neighbors and local townspeople decided to walk over and check on them. The moment they stepped inside the dark barn, they walked right into a nightmare. Lying on the wooden floor, piled together, were the bodies of the Gruber family. They had been brutally butchered. The silence inside that barn was heavy, almost suffocating. But the horror didn't stop there. When they searched the rest of the farmhouse, they found 2 more bodies. The family's new maid, who had arrived just hours before, and the youngest child, still in his crib. Within minutes, the isolated farm became a massive crime scene. Detectives searched every single room, every closet, and even the creepy attic. But the killer had vanished, leaving behind almost no clues. However, there was one disturbing detail that completely shook the investigators. The evidence showed that after the family was slaughtered, someone had actually stayed on the farm for several days. Someone had taken care of the cattle. Someone had cooked meals in the kitchen. They had even kept the fireplace burning to stay warm. The killer had literally lived in that house, sleeping in their beds and eating their food, all while surrounded by the dead bodies of the people they had just murdered. That single detail has baffled investigators for over a century. What kind of person does something like that? Why didn't they run immediately? And those heavy, unexplained footsteps the family kept hearing in the attic days before the tragedy, could the killer have been living up there with them the entire time?
The investigation dragged on for months. Police interrogated everyone they could find: neighbors, relatives, passing travelers, and dozens of potential suspects. Over the decades, more than 100 people were brought in for questioning. A few were seen as prime suspects. Some even confessed to the crimes, only for their stories to completely fall apart under intense interrogation. Yet, despite years of digging, no one was ever charged. No one was ever convicted. Slowly, Hinterkaifeck turned into one of the most infamous cold cases in German history. Even today, more than a century later, experts and amateur detectives still obsess over the evidence, desperately hoping to solve the puzzle that defeated the police. But the most terrifying questions still linger in the dark. Who actually made those footprints in the snow? Who was pacing back and forth in the attic at night? And if the killer really did stay on the farm for days after the massacre, how long had the family been living under the same roof with their killer, without ever knowing it? Unfortunately, we'll probably never get those answers. The farmhouse itself is long gone, demolished in 1923, just a year after the murders. But tearing down the wood and bricks didn't erase the nightmare. The story of Hinterkaifeck still haunts investigators and horror fans across the globe. Because sometimes, the most disturbing stories you'll ever hear are the ones that actually happened. 3 real mysteries. 3 cases that still leave us with 0 answers. Which one gave you the biggest chills? The frozen horrors of Dyatlov Pass, the unsettling mystery of Elisa Lam, or the terrifying secrets hidden inside Hinterkaifeck Farm? Let me know down in the comments. And if you love real-life horror and unsolved mysteries, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Because at the end of the day, reality is far more terrifying than fiction. Good night.